In the last 48 hours, the United States Navy has executed a deployment that breaks every standard rule of littoral risk assessment. They have rushed the USS Tripoli LHA-7, a 45,000-ton America-class amphibious assault ship with an 844-foot flight deck, 270,000 horsepower gas turbines pushing it to a sustained 22 knots, and a turning radius measured in thousands of yards, straight into the 21 nautical mile-wide kill zone of the Strait of Hormuz. On board sits the entire 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, approximately 3,500 Marines and sailors, plus up to 20 F-35B, Lightning II stealth jets configured to turn this single hull into a Lightning carrier, generating 60 to 80 combat sorties per day without catapults, without arresting wires, and without the electromagnetic launch system vulnerabilities that forced the Ford-class carrier out of theater after its recent 30-hour fire. This arrival follows a high-speed transit through the Strait of Malacca, covering more than 3,200 nautical miles in under 10 days, timed exactly as President Trump publicly floats the operational concept of seizing Iran's Karg Island oil terminal, and while every commercial tanker route through Hormuz has been at a complete standstill for the last 11 days. The U.S. Navy has already sunk or disabled more than 120 Iranian naval vessels in the past 3 weeks alone. The IRGC's fleet of over 100 fast attack craft and mine layers has been reduced to operational scrap. Coastal launch sites for Chinese-supplied C-802 Noor anti-ship missiles have taken 47 confirmed precision strikes. The Iranian drone swarms have been attrited at a 12-to-1 loss ratio, and yet the Pentagon has now deliberately placed one of its slowest, most vulnerable, most expensive to replace high-value assets, a ship whose well-deck and hangar spaces make it a floating magazine for 3,500 troops, 20 F-35Bs each costing $100 million apiece, and enough JP-5 fuel to keep them airborne for days, into waters that Iran still publicly claims it can close within 4 minutes of the first launch order. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. This channel doesn't speculate. We break down military reality using data, physics, and cold equations. If you value that kind of analysis, the kind that turns paradoxes into equations, hit subscribe and stay with me while we run the numbers on why this move was made. Here is the battlefield, defined in raw geometry and tonnage. The Strait of Hormuz narrows to exactly 21 nautical miles between the Iranian coast at Bandar Abbas and the Omani Peninsula at Musandam. At that choke point, the navigable shipping channel shrinks to less than 2 nautical miles wide in places. Water depth averages 200 to 300 feet, perfect for bottom-moored influence mines and drifting contact mines. 20% of the planet's daily oil supply, 21 million barrels per day, normally transits that gap in very large crude carriers that displace 300,000 deadweight tons each, move at a stately 12 to 14 knots, and carry zero defensive systems. Right now, those tankers are stationary. Insurance premiums have spiked past 2% of hull value per single transit. That is $6 million to $8 million extra per voyage for a single 2 million barrel load. One successful hit, and Lloyd's of London stops underwriting the route entirely. Iran's strategy is textbook asymmetric sea denial, refined over 20 years and costed to the penny. They do not need to sink every tanker. They only need to make the insurance math, the time math, and the risk math impossible. A single Chinese-supplied C-802 Noor anti-ship missile, 120 to 220 kilometer range, Mach 0.9 sea-skimming flight profile, 165 kilogram warhead, unit cost approximately $800,000, can be fired from a truck-mounted launcher hidden behind a coastal ridgeline. An Iranian Ghadir-class midget submarine, 29 meters long, 6 knots submerged, armed with 2 533mm torpedoes, can loiter undetected for days in the shallow waters. Then cheap quadcopter drones carrying 10-kilogram-shaped charges cost less than $20,000 each and can be launched in swarms of 50 from fishing dhows. Drifting mines, some as simple as modified commercial anchors with 200-kilogram explosive charges, cost under $50,000 per unit and require no guidance at all. The entire Iranian playbook is built on cheap versus expensive, slow versus fast, land-based versus blue water. One Noor missile versus a $1.8 billion Arleigh Burke destroyer escorting a tanker. One drone versus a $100 million F-35B. One mine versus a $300 million tanker. and its $80 million cargo. This is not random harassment. This is an economic attrition equation designed to force the U.S. Navy into a choice: accept closure or accept unsustainable losses in the world's most confined, most surveilled, most weapon-saturated littoral. And that is exactly where the carrier-only playbook has already failed the first part of the military equation. The situation is now crystal clear. Hormuz is physically closed by mines and persistent low-cost threats. The U.S. maintains air dominance east of the strait out to 300 nautical miles, but it has zero persistent physical control inside the 21-mile gap. Tankers will not move. Global oil markets have already priced in a 30-day shutdown at $112 per barrel. The hidden problem is emerging in the data feeds from USNI fleet trackers and commercial satellite imagery. Minesweeping operations in a contested littoral are brutally slow and expose high-value hulls for days on end. Legacy Avenger-class minesweepers have been retired. The remaining littoral combat ship mine countermeasures modules are currently 8,000 nautical miles away in the Indo-Pacific theater. To clear even one safe transit lane requires ships to operate inside the kill zone for 72 to 96 continuous hours while under threat from coastal batteries that can reach out in under 4 minutes. Why everything the Navy has tried so far is failing is now becoming quantifiable. A Nimitz-class carrier 200 nautical miles east can generate 100-plus sorties per day, but each F/A-18E/F Super Hornet burns $20,000 per flight hour, and each F-35C burns $35,000 per flight hour. Loitering time over the exact 21-mile gap is limited by fuel and by the need to maintain combat air patrol over the entire Arabian Sea. When each defensive missile fired, SM-2 at $2.1 million per round or SM-6 at $4.1 million per round, is being launched against incoming threats that cost 1/10 as much. The cost-per-kill ratio is running 3 to 1 or worse before you even account for the $1.8 billion hull you are trying to protect. The system was never designed for this kind of persistent, low-intensity, high-volume littoral denial. And this is where the equation breaks. The U.S. Navy has now introduced a platform that was purpose-built for exactly this scenario, a platform the carrier strike groups were never intended to duplicate. But before we reveal how the Tripoli changes every variable in that equation, we first have to finish mapping why the previous approach collapsed under its own numbers. The enemy strategy is working precisely because it forces the world's most expensive navy to fight with the wrong tools in the wrong water. Carriers excel at blue water sea control at standoff ranges of 300-plus nautical miles. They were designed to project power across open ocean against peer fleets, not to babysit slow-moving tankers inside a 21-mile corridor swept by land-based missiles that arrive in Mach 0.9 sea-skimming flight profiles. The physics of the geography itself defeats the carrier model. The narrow channel compresses the defensive problem into a shooting gallery where reaction time is measured in seconds, and where even one lucky hit forces a $2 billion asset into dry dock repairs. This is not speculation. This is the data. This is the physics. This is the cost equation that the Pentagon ran and then quietly rejected. So the real question we have to answer right now is simple. Why risk the Tripoli and 3,500 Marines in the exact box Iran spent 2 decades building to trap high-value targets? The answer lies in the second half of the military equation, the unexpected solution that carriers alone could never deliver. Let's run the second half of the military equation with the precision the Pentagon uses when it models littoral denial scenarios. We already mapped the situation. Hormuz is closed by a layered asymmetric threat. The hidden problem is the inability to restore physical control inside the 21 nautical mile gap without exposing multi-billion-dollar assets for days. Now we quantify exactly why everything tried. So far fails, why the cost equation is unsustainable. How and why the USS Tripoli represents the unexpected solution that rewrites every variable. Begin with the carrier strike group model that has dominated U.S. naval planning for 80 years. A Nimitz-class carrier positioned 200 nautical miles east of Hormuz can surge 120 sorties per day with F/A, 18E/F Super Hornets, and F-35Cs. Each Super Hornet has a combat radius of 400 nautical miles on internal fuel, Mach 1.8 speed, and carries up to 4 AIM-120D AMRAAMs plus 2 AGM-88 EAARGM anti-radiation missiles. On paper, that looks dominant. In practice, the narrow geography defeats it. The 21-mile strait compresses the defensive problem into a 4-minute reaction window once a C-802 Noor launches from the Iranian coast. At Mach 0.9 and sea-skimming altitude, the Noor covers the final 100 kilometers in under 3 minutes 40 seconds. The carrier's aircraft must already be orbiting overhead with weapons preloaded, which means dedicating 30 to 40% of the daily sortie rate just to combat air patrol over one 21-mile box. Each Super Hornet flight hour costs the taxpayer $20,400. An F-35C is $35,200 per hour. Sustaining that cap 24 hours a day for 30 days burns $18 million in fuel and maintenance before a single defensive shot is fired. Now layer in the escort costs. An Arleigh Burke destroyer providing close-in defense for a tanker inside the strait carries 96 vertical launch cells. SAM-2 Block 3C missiles cost $2.1 million each. SM-6 dual-purpose missiles cost $4.1 million each. Iranian tactics call for saturation, 2 or 3 Noors plus 20 cheap drones in a single wave. The destroyer's Aegis system can track 100-plus targets. But the engagement window is so compressed that it often fires 2 missiles per incoming threat to guarantee a kill. That is $4.2 million to $8.2 million per wave against threats that cost $800,000 for the missile and $20,000 for each drone. The cost-per-kill ratio is running 5 to 1 or worse. Add the $1.8 billion replacement cost of the destroyer itself, and the equation tilts decisively toward the attacker. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. The carrier model was engineered for blue water engagements against peer fleets at standoff ranges of 300-plus nautical miles. It was never designed for this. The system was never designed for this. Minesweeping makes the failure even clearer. The U.S. Navy retired the last Avenger-class minesweeper in 2024. See, the littoral combat ship MCM packages rely on the Knifefish unmanned underwater vehicle and MH-53E helicopters towing the ALMDS laser mine detection system. Each LCS must loiter inside the kill zone for 72 to 96 hours to clear a single 2 nautical mile wide lane. Top speed of an LCS is 45 knots, but mine hunting operations require 8 to 12 knots for sensor accuracy. Iranian coastal radars can detect the LCS at 80 kilometers. A single truck-launched Noor reaches out 220 kilometers. The LCS carries only 24 RIM-116 RAM missiles for point defense. Against a coordinated swarm, it is outgunned before the first mine is neutralized. One successful hit, and the Navy loses a $600 million hull plus the entire MCM module it carries. The cost equation here is even worse. $600 million asset versus $50,000 drifting mine. And this is where the equation breaks. The U.S. Navy has introduced the USS Tripoli LHA-7, configured as a Lightning carrier with capabilities no carrier strike group can duplicate inside confined littoral waters. Tripoli displaces 45,000 tons full load, measures 844 feet long, and operates 270,000 horsepower gas turbines for a sustained 22 knots. Its flight deck is 900 feet long and 132 feet wide, short enough for F-35B short takeoff and vertical landing, but long enough to cycle 20 jets continuously. Each F-35B costs $100 million, carries internal fuel for a 450 nautical mile combat radius, achieves Mach 1.6, and can hover to land vertically even when loaded with 2 1,000-pound JDAMs and 4 AIM-120S. The B model's STOVL design removes the need for catapults, arresting gear, or the EMALS system that failed on the Ford. LHA-1 Tripoli can generate 60 to 80 sorties per day from inside the strait itself, placing its F-35Bs in a 10-minute response window instead of a 40-minute cycle from 200 nautical miles away. But air power is only half the solution. Below deck, Tripoli's 840 by 60-foot well deck holds up to 3 LCAC hovercraft. Each LCAC rides on a 100-ton air cushion, achieves 40-plus knots over water or marsh, and carries 70 tons of payload. one entire Marine rifle company plus two M1A1 Abrams tanks or four LAV-25 light armored vehicles. Transit time from Tripoli to an Iranian beach or pier is under 15 minutes at 40 knots. Once ashore, the Marines can seize coastal battery sites within 30 minutes, neutralizing the launchers that threaten the strait. The same well deck supports 4 LCU utility landing craft for sustained logistics. Overhead, 12 MV-22 Ospreys B Osprey tiltrotors move 24 Marines each at 240 knots cruise speed, 3 times faster than the CH-53E Super Stallion and with twice the range. One MV-22 sortie can insert a platoon onto a ridgeline overlooking the narrowest point of Hormuz in under 12 minutes from launch. Compare the systems in detail. A carrier strike group is built for sea control at standoff, 300-plus nautical miles, high-volume blue water strikes, peer Navy engagements. Its aircraft require large decks, catapults, and massive escorts. It excels at open ocean power projection but fails the literal physics test. Too far, too slow to react, too expensive to sustain in a 21-mile shooting gallery. An America-class LHA with F-35Bs and Marines is built for expeditionary littoral operations exactly like this one. The F-35B's vertical landing lets the ship operate without a 4,000-foot runway. The LCACs and Ospreys give it organic ground seizure capability that no carrier can match. The entire package costs $3.2 billion to build, 1/6 the price of a Ford-class carrier, yet delivers local air superiority plus physical control of the choke point. The Marines turn the 21-mile gap from a denied zone into a defended corridor under direct ground observation. Cost per kill analysis flips in America's favor. Instead of firing $4 million SM-6 from a destroyer, Tripoli's F-35Bs can use $25,000 GBU-39 small-diameter bombs or $100,000 AGM-114 Hellfires from standoff ranges of 40 nautical miles. One jet can neutralize 4 to 6 coastal launchers per sortie. Once Marines are ashore, they use Javelin anti-tank missiles at $80,000 each to destroy truck-mounted Noors at 2.5 kilometers. The cost ratio moves from 5 to 1 against the U.S. to 1 to 10 in our favor. Mines can be cleared under direct ground cover by Marine combat engineers using Mark 7 mechanical sweep gear and hand-placed charges instead of exposing $600 million LCS hulls for days. The unexpected solution is now on station. Use the Tripoli and the 31st MEU as a rapid seize and hold package to physically open the strait, secure the coastal batteries, clear the immediate minefields, and create a defended 2 nautical mile lane that insurance underwriters will actually cover. Carriers maintain the outer screen. Tripoli handles the inner fight. The Navy is no longer trying to bomb every launcher from 200 miles away. It is putting boots on the ground where the launchers live. This is where the entire military equation changes. The system the Navy was never designed to use in this role has become the decisive platform. And that forces the next question. What does this move actually signal to Tehran? And what global risks does it unlock if Iran miscalculates the next 72 hours? The strategic implication is now locked in by the data, and it is not what Tehran or the global markets expected. This is not an invasion fleet. The Tripoli and the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit were never sent to occupy Iran. They were sent to physically seize control of the exact pieces of the 21 nautical mile gap that the carrier strike groups could never reach without bleeding $18 million a day in flight hours and $4 million per defensive missile shot. And the message to Tehran is surgical and deliberate. We do not need your permission to keep the strait open. We have the organic air power, the hovercraft speed, and the Marine ground teams to take the coastal batteries and the minefields that matter most. And we can do it in under 72 hours from the moment the order is given. The timing is the pattern breaker. President Trump has publicly floated seizing Karg Island while simultaneously signaling he might walk away from the broader campaign. That is not contradictory. It is sequenced escalation. The Tripoli gives the Pentagon a limited, reversible option. Insert Marines under F-35B cover, clear a defended lane, let the first tankers test the route under insurance coverage, and then withdraw. No full occupation, no open-ended nation building. Not just enough ground presence to flip the insurance math from 2% hull value to single-digit basis points. This is classic expeditionary littoral warfare, and the America-class LHA was purpose-built for it when the Navy retired the last Tarawa-class ships in 2015. Big picture implications stretch far beyond the 21-mile choke. Global oil markets have already priced in a 30-day closure at $112 per barrel. Every additional week the strait stays contested adds an estimated $14 billion in daily economic drag worldwide, $400 billion if the shutdown drags into May. Europe, Japan, India, and South Korea import 70 to 85% of their crude through Hormuz. Though China burns through strategic reserves at 1.2 million barrels per day and would be forced to choose between confronting the U.S. Navy directly or rationing fuel for its own planned carrier groups. Beijing is watching the Tripoli deployment with extreme interest because the same Lightning carrier concept, 20 F-35Bs, LCACs at 40 knots, MV-22 Ospreys at 240 knots, translates almost one-to-one to the first island chain around Taiwan. One successful seize and hold operation inside Hormuz proves the model works in the world's most confined, most weapon-saturated littoral. That demonstration costs the U.S. $3.2 billion per hull and buys strategic deterrence in the Pacific for the next decade. Future risk and escalation are now quantifiable in hours, not weeks. If Iran miscalculates the Tripoli's arrival as prelude to a full landing on Karg or the mainland, the response window collapses to minutes. Iranian coastal radars at Bandar Abbas can paint the 45,000-ton LHA at 120 kilometers. A coordinated barrage of 40 C-802 Noors and 100 drones could arrive inside the 4-minute envelope. The Tripoli's defensive suite, 2 rolling airframe missile launchers, 2 phalanx CIWS, and the F-35Bs already airborne, is formidable, but not infinite. One lucky hit on the well deck with Marines and LCACs aboard turns this into direct combat between U.S. ground forces in the water and Iranian coastal defenses. Oil markets do not wait for de-escalation talks. A single confirmed strike on an LHA would spike prices past $150 per barrel inside 24 hours and force the U.S. into a retaliatory cycle that could pull Russia and China off the sidelines. The hidden cost equation here is the one Tehran refuses to run publicly. Each Noor missile costs $800,000. Each F-35B sortie that neutralizes a launcher costs $35,000 in fuel and ordnance, yet removes 4 to 6 launch vehicles permanently. Once Marines are ashore, they use $80,000 Javelin missiles at 2.5-kilometer range to destroy truck-mounted batteries that the carriers could only hit with $100,000 JDAMs from 40 nautical miles away. The cost-per-kill ratio flips from 5 to 1 against the U.S. to 1 to 10 in our favor within the first 48 hours of ground presence. Mines that cost $50,000 each become irrelevant once combat engineers clear them under direct observation, instead of under fire from 200 nautical miles offshore. This is where the entire asymmetric denial strategy collapses. And this is where the equation breaks for Iran. The U.S. Navy has now placed its most versatile, most expendable high-value asset inside the exact box Iran spent 20 years and billions of dollars building to trap carrier strike groups. They did it knowing the ship might take hits. They did it while the president is openly talking about walking away from the fight. They did it because the Tripoli and the 31st MEU solved the literal physics problem that carriers alone could never solve. But the real paradox is no longer, why did they send the Tripoli? The real paradox is, what happens when Iran realizes the Marines are already ashore, the LCACs are already clearing the first lane, and the minesweepers are right behind them under F-35B cover? This channel will track every sortie count, every LCAC launch, every mile of channel opened, and every cost ratio update as the operation unfolds. Drop a comment with the one number or system you want broken down next. The F-35B STOVL envelope inside 21 miles, the LCAC hovercraft payload math, or the exact insurance flip threshold that will restart tanker traffic. We will run that equation in the next video. This is the data, this is the logic, this is the military reality. The Strait of Hormuz just became a lot more expensive for Iran to keep closed, and a lot cheaper for the United States to reopen.